May it please the court?
Yes.
Counsel. Good morning, Mr. Bruton. Would you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury and spell your name for the record?
Jerome Bruton, Jerome Bruton.
Mr. Bruton, are you from Jacksonville, Florida?
Yes,
Were you born and raised here?
yes.
Where do you currently live?
Hilliard,
How long have you lived in Hilliard?
4 years.
And how are you employed?
Through Dr. Pepper Snapple,
What kind of work do you do for Dr. Pepper?
mechanic,
And how long have you been a mechanic for Dr. Pepper?
15 years.
Mr. Bruton, in February of 2012, your relative passed away.
Yes,
Who was that?
my uncle, Louis Bruton.
And did your uncle have any children?
No,
When he passed or after he passed away, were you tasked with the responsibility of caring for the home and the property where he lived at the time of his passing?
yes.
And where was that home?
The north side of Jacksonville off of Broward Road.
Did you begin to manage that property in 2012?
Yes,
And were you still taking care of the property in 2013?
yes.
Was anyone living at the house?
No,
Now, in April of 2013, did you check on the property?
yes.
And did you notice anything unusual?
No.
When was the next time you went to the home
In
after?
August of 2013.
Was the home equipped with an alarm system?
Yes,
And if someone had been inside that home in between April and August of 2013, would you have been notified?
yes,
Mr. Bruton, in preparation for your testimony, did you review photographs of the state attorney's office?
yes,
Mr. Bruton, let me direct your attention to the screen in front of you, and I'm directing your attention to State's Exhibit UU, which will be later I'd like to direct the witness's attention to what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit UU for identification, and that will be later introduced into evidence. Mr. Bruton, what is this?
that's my deceased uncle's house.
And is that a true and accurate depiction of the house on Broward Road as you found it in August of 2013?
Yes,
When you went in August of 2013, what time generally did you arrive?
morning,
And what was the purpose of your visit?
to maintain the property, cut the grass.
Did you actually begin cutting the grass?
Yes,
And as you were cutting the grass, did you notice anything that caught your attention?
yes.
What was that?
A stroller,
What color was the stroller?
blue.
Did it concern you that there was a blue stroller on the property?
Yes,
Where was the stroller located in relation to the house?
the west side of the home.
And Mr. Bruton, I'd again like to direct your attention to the screen to what has previously been marked for identification as State's VV, and which will later be introduced into evidence. What is this?
That's the stroller.
And is that a true and accurate depiction of the stroller that you found in August of 2013?
Yes,
What did you do upon finding that blue stroller?
I had called my wife.
Why did you call your wife?
To ask her if she remembered anything about a stroller.
Now, did you remember that law enforcement officers had been looking for a stroller in relation to an investigation?
She had reminded me and also asked me the color of the stroller.
So what did you do based on your conversation with your wife?
Called Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
And did a Jacksonville Sheriff's officer arrive on scene?
Yes.
What did you do when that officer arrived on scene?
Pointed the stroller out to him.
Mr. Bruton, do you know Donald Smith?
No,
Have you ever met him before?
no,
Did anyone other than you have permission to be on that property on Broward Road?
no.
And are you familiar with the Highlands Baptist Church?
Yes.
How are you familiar with the church?
My daughter and son attended daycare there.
How far away is Highlands Baptist Church from the property where you found the stroller?
I'd say about 2/10 of a mile.
Now, may I have a moment?
You may.
No further questions.
All right, any questions? No questions. All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time this morning. You may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state would call James Carter to the witness stand.
James Carter.
May it please the court.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Hello, sir.
Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
I'm James Carter.
Mr. Carter, how are you currently employed?
I am retired.
And from what occupation did you retire from?
I was a officer for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
How long did you work for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
A little over 23 years.
And your final assignment with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, where were you assigned? What division?
I was a major crimes investigator for the crime scene unit.
And directing your attention back to the summer of 2013, was that the assignment that you had held at that time?
Yes, sir.
Specifically, in August 10th of 2013, were you dispatched to a residence at 2339 Broward Road in regards to the recovery of a stroller related to the death of Cherish Periwinkle?
Yes, sir, I did.
And When you arrived at that location, what would have been the first thing that you would have done?
I met with the detective, I believe it was a homicide detective at the scene.
Did he direct you to possible evidence that was located on that property?
Yes, sir, he did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Sir, I'm now showing you a series of photographs, first labeled for identification purposes as UU, State's Exhibit UU in evidence, through State's AAA. If you could just review those photographs for me briefly.
Okay, sir.
And prior to coming to court this morning, had you had the opportunity to review State's Exhibits W through AAA?
Yes, sir, I did.
And are these the photographs that you took documenting the recovery of the evidence on Broward Road on August 10th of 2013?
Yes, sir, they were.
And do they fairly and accurately depict the house, the evidence, and the recovery of that evidence?
Yes, sir, they do.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the State will move into evidence State's Exhibit UU through AAA as the next numbered exhibits.
All right, Madam Clerk, we're on 47, right?
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I publish them electronically to the jury?
You may. Let me get them noted for the record, though. UU is entered as State's Exhibit 47, VV 48, WW 49, XX 50, YY 51, CZ 52, and AAA 53 in evidence. You may publish.
Thank you. Sir, I'm now showing what's been previously marked for identification and then moved into evidence as State's 47. Could you please describe what's depicted in that photograph?
Just a photo part of the front of the house, and which included the driveway where I had parked my van.
Okay. And like you indicated, this is your crime scene unit van that was parked in the driveway in the photograph?
Yes, sir.
Were you directed to the location by detectives as to where the evidence was located?
Yes, sir.
Now moving on to State's Exhibit 48 in evidence, please describe what's depicted in this photograph.
This is the west side of the home, and it showed the stroller along with some trash cans.
Okay. And if we look at the top right corner, and I'll circle here on the photograph, is that your evidence technician crime scene van?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in relation, going back to State's Exhibit 47, this location where the stroller was found was around the corner from the house just adjacent to where the driveway was in the house.
Correct, sir.
And this house, does it face directly to Broward Road?
Yes, it does.
Now showing you what's been previously marked and moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 49 is just a closer view of the stroller that was located?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and did this match the description of the stroller that police had been looking for since June of 2013?
I'm not familiar with that, sir.
You're not familiar with that information? Moving on to State's Exhibit 50, what's depicted in this photograph?
There were items from the store, I believe.
Okay. And these were items both that were purchased as well as some children's items such as umbrellas and things of that nature?
Correct, sir.
And so you actually had to lift the lid to see the items contained within that trash can, correct?
Yes, sir.
Moving on to State's 51, were these the two umbrellas that were located inside the trash can that we were just looking at in the previous photograph?
Yes, sir, they are.
And did you collect those for evidentiary purposes?
Yes, sir, I did.
Moving on to State's Exhibit 52, is this the bottom of that same trash can once you had removed the items that were on top of the bottom of the can?
Correct, sir.
Depicted here in the center of that photograph in State's 52, is that a pair of purple or pink flip-flops that were on the bottom of the trash can?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And did you collect those in evidence as well?
Yes, sir, I did.
So moving now into State's Exhibit 53, are these all the household items and evidence that you collected and then boxed up from that scene in August of 2013?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay, so in addition to the flip-flops and the umbrella, you mentioned the purchases from the dollar store that were contained within the trash can.
Correct, sir.
Thank you, sir. Once you collected that evidence, did you submit them into the property room as protocol to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Yes, sir, I did.
Thank you, sir. I don't have any further questions.
Thank you.
Can you cross? All right, thank you. Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
You may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Dr. Rao to stand.
Dr. Rao,
May we approach?
you may. Donald James Smith. The state and the defense hereby stipulate that the following facts are true, and you, the jury, should accept said facts proven beyond a reasonable doubt. The deceased person examined by Dr. Valerie Rao in medical examiner number 13-1034 was identified as Cherish Periwinkle, and this is signed by the defendant, the defense, and the state.
May I inquire?
You may.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Dr. Rao, please introduce yourself to the jury and spell your name for the record.
Yes, my name is Dr. Valerie Rao. My last name is spelled R-A-O. I am the Chief Medical Examiner for District 4 and part of District 3.
As the chief medical examiner, what kind of doctor are you?
I am a forensic pathologist.
Will you tell the jury where you went to college?
Yes, so I got my degree in medicine in 1971, after which I went to London. I got my degree in India, name of the medical school, St. John's Medical School in Bangalore, South India. After which I went to London. I spent a year and a half doing pathology at two hospitals, one St. Heliers Hospital in South London, the other St. Andrews Hospital in the East End of London. After which I came to the US. I spent 5 years doing residency training, 2 years doing clinical pathology at Berkshire Medical Center, Pittsfield, Massachusetts, 2 years doing anatomic pathology in Albany Medical Center, Albany, New York, 1 year doing forensic pathology in Baltimore for the state of Maryland. I'm board certified in clinical, anatomic, and forensic pathology. I was medical examiner in Tucson, Arizona for a year, after which I went to Miami-Dade County, where I was an associate medical examiner for a total of 19 years. I then took a chief position in the central part of the state, District 5. I was there as chief medical examiner for 3 years. I then took a teaching position in the University of Missouri in Columbia, after which I came to Jacksonville. I've been in Jacksonville for about 13 years.
So for a total of how many years have you been a pathologist?
37 years.
Will you explain to the jury what pathology is? You mentioned clinical, anatomical, and forensic, and will you go ahead and explain each of those to the jury, please?
Yes. So pathology is a study of disease in the human body. So in order to become a medical examiner, you first have to be a general pathologist. So there are two branches of general pathology. One is anatomic pathology. For example, you went to the hospital and you had your gallbladder removed or a tumor removed. That specimen is sent to the anatomic pathologist who will make the diagnosis of what it is. So that is a period of 2 years. The clinical pathology part is laboratory tests. If you went to the hospital and you had a battery of tests done, the clinical pathologist would look at those tests. So that is a total of 4 years. Then the subspecialty is forensic pathology that I chose to pursue, where one deals with sudden, unexpected, unnatural death. So trauma, drug overdoses, automobile accidents, stabbings, shootings, bruises, lacerations, all these come under the purview of the forensic pathologist.
In your experience, can you estimate the number of autopsies that you have conducted?
Thousands of cases.
What are your duties as the chief medical examiner here in Duval County?
In the state of Florida, the medical examiner is required to sign a death certificate on cases of sudden, unexpected, unnatural death. So the cause of death and the manner of death are the duties of the medical examiner in the state of Florida.
For how long have you been the chief medical examiner here?
Since 2010.
As a result of conducting autopsies, do you actually offer an opinion as to cause and manner of death?
Yes.
And do you take care during an autopsy to document injuries or pathologies that you see and observe?
Yes.
How do you do so?
So we have 3 ways of documenting to the other. The scalp is reflected forward and back. The skull is removed. The brain is looked at in the cranial cavity. Then it is removed, it's weighed, it's sectioned, again looking for disease that could account for the death of the individual. And after that, an autopsy report is put out.
You mentioned that in this particular case, you conducted the autopsy the day after Cherish's body was transported to your office. Is that correct?
Yes.
On what day was that?
So the date of the autopsy was the 23rd, and the sex battery kit was done on the 22nd of June, 2013.
Did you determine the weight of Cherish Periwinkle?
Yes.
And what was that?
She was 67 pounds.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
Dr. Rao, let me show you a set of photographs that have been marked in alpha order, triple B through quadruple V as in Victor. Have you reviewed these photographs prior to your testimony today? Did you review these photographs prior to your testimony today?
Yes,
And in fact, are each of these photographs that were taken at your direction?
yes,
This time I will tender into evidence what has been pre-marked for identification from states triple B to states quadruple B.
Judge, we'd ask that the court take note of our prior objection.
That will be noted for the record. Triple B will be entered as State's Exhibit 54, Triple C 55, Triple D 56, Triple E 57, Triple F 58, Triple G 59, Triple H 60, Triple I 61, Triple J 62, Triple K 63, Triple L 64, Triple M 65, Triple N 66, Triple O 67, Triple P 68, Triple Q 69, and Triple R 70, Triple S 71, Triple T 72, Triple U 73, Triple V 74, Triple W 75, Triple X 76. Is there a Triple Y? Or we're not there on that one yet? There is? Okay, Triple Y is 77, Triple Z is 78. Quadruple,
Triple Y is demonstrative.
oh, okay, so that, I need to go back then and not mark Triple Y, and Triple Z will be number 77 in evidence, correct?
Correct.
And quadruple A is 78, and quadruple B is 79, all in evidence.
Okay, Dr. Rao, let me direct your attention to your screen, please. Do you always take a photograph of the face of the body that you are working on, reflecting the medical examiner number assigned to the body?
yes,
Let me direct your attention to what's been introduced into evidence. It states 54. Does this photograph, in fact, reflect the medical examiner case number assigned to Cherish Periwinkle?
yes. So 13-1034 means that in the year 2013, she was the 1034th case that came to the medical examiner's office.
Dr. Rao, you mentioned that the body was washed after it arrived to your office. Was her hair also cut?
Yes.
And for what reason?
So during the autopsy, when the scalp was reflected, there was an area of hemorrhage in her scalp that couldn't be seen because the hair masks the injuries on the scalp. So I shaved her entire head so that if there was a pattern on her scalp, we would be able to see that and photograph it.
Okay, next, I'm going to, as we go through your photographs, I'm going to first highlight for the jury what to expect. This next series of photographs, Dr. Rao, are as to injuries, superficial injuries to Cherish Periwinkle's body. Let me direct your attention to what's been introduced into evidence as States 55. Will you please explain to the jury what is reflected in this photograph?
Okay, so what you're looking at are two areas of injury. There is one right here, and there is another one right there. So the contrast between the two, what you are looking at in this area is post-mortem ant activity. The ants bite the bodies, anything that stays there, and she was in this wooded area. So there were a lot of ants there. So after death, that's why you have that very different color that's yellow, dried, and parchment-like. Whereas this area, you can't really see her nipple because she's very light-skinned and it kind of blends with the rest of her chest area. But you can definitely see this is where her nipple is, and she has bruising right there that is caused prior to death while she was alive.
And do you have an opinion as to that injury?
Yes.
Let me show you what's been introduced and marked as States Exhibit 56. Is this in fact a close-up of the right nipple of Cherish Periwinkle?
Yes. So just to tell you, this is where her nipple and areola, the brown area surrounding the nipple is. And around that you can see the bruising, the pink-blue discoloration.
Dr. Rao, what is your opinion as to that injury?
That is consistent with somebody sucking on her breast.
Let me direct your attention to what's been marked as introduced into evidence as States Exhibit 57. Will you orient the jury to this photograph, please, and explain the injuries reflected in it?
Yes. So this is her left leg. This is the knee area right here, so you can orient which part of the body. You have bruising right here. You have bruising right here, and you have a scratch here, a small bruise there.
What were you able to determine as to when, in relation to death, Cherish sustained these injuries?
All her injuries that she sustained are prior to her death, consistent with that time frame.
Let me direct your attention to photograph 58. Will you please explain what's reflected in this photograph?
So she has an injury right here. She has an injury right there. Smaller bruises right there.
State 59, will you explain to the jury what this photograph is of?
Okay, so you're looking at the back of her left leg, and she has a bruise right there. This is the back of her knee, so to orient you, back of her knee, and this is where her buttock area is right there. She has a bruise on the back of her left thigh.
State 60, will you please explain to the jury what this photograph reflects?
Yes, so this is her right leg. To orient you, this is her knee, her right knee. She has a scratch right there. She has a scratch right there.
Dr. Rao, you mentioned that you attended the scene where Cherish's body was discovered, and you saw at the scene branches and trampled down reeds and various debris around her body. Is that right?
Yes.
And these scratches were consistent with what, in your opinion?
So when it's consistent with when she was carried to the area where she was thrown, the long grass would scratch her leg and cause those injuries.
Let me show you State 61. Will you please describe to the jury what's depicted in State 61?
So this is the side of her right thigh. She has a bruise right there.
State 62.
This is the back of her right arm. She has a bruise right there, and she has small abrasions right there.
Thank you. Okay, Dr. Rao, do you have an opinion as to the cause and manner of death of the death of Cherish Periwinkle?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Do you have an opinion as to how Cherish Periwinkle died?
Yes,
What is it?
mechanical asphyxia.
Will you explain what that is to the jury?
So what she sustained was tremendous force on her neck, such that she could not breathe. She suffered swelling of her brain as a result of lack of oxygen to her brain, and as a result of which she died.
Before we review the photographs taken of Cherish Periwinkle's neck, will you talk to the jury? I want you to talk to the jury about strangulation. Do you have experience in strangulation cases?
Yes, many, many times, yes.
And in fact, based on your experience, will you explain to the jury how long at a minimum it takes before a person dies from strangulation?
Okay, so you have different types of strangulations. You have manual, where somebody uses their hands to cause the lack of oxygen to the brain. You have a ligature, which means that you have something that you use to tie the neck of that person, again, to result in lack of oxygen to the brain. So these are the types of strangulation that one gets. So the time frame, we have to understand, it is not like something that is without movement between two people. So if there is no movement between two people, and somebody is, for example, unconscious from drugs, alcohol, or elderly, there would not be that much movement, because to some extent you're incapacitated. But here we have two people who are in a struggle. The child is not incapacitated, and she is going to struggle during this entire process. So I cannot tell you exactly how much time it would have taken to cause the lack of blood supply to her brain and her death. She has struggled because we have evidence of that struggle. So if there is no struggle, and it's all, we cannot do experiments on that. So usually a period of 3 to 5 minutes of lack of oxygen to the brain, that person would die.
Okay, next let's review the photographs of Cherish Periwinkle's neck. Let me direct your attention to State 63. Will you please orient the jury to this photograph and explain what it depicts?
Okay, so to orient, this is the front of her neck. You have her ears, left ear, right there. And this is the front of her neck. So what you are seeing on her neck is this broad area of bruising. And above the area of bruising, you have very fine little pinpoint areas of hemorrhage that are referred to as petechiae. So you have it here. You can see the petechial hemorrhage right here, and you can see the petechial hemorrhage right here.
Dr. Ryle, how is petechial hemorrhage caused?
So petechial hemorrhage, they look like little pepper spots. And the reason you get that is when you occlude the jugular veins by pressure on the neck, the blood continues to flow through the carotid arteries, the vertebral arteries. These are just blood vessels, so I'm just giving you the names, but that's just terminology. But these are major vessels to supply oxygen to the brain, the arteries. But then the blood has to come back to the heart, and so they come back through the veins, the jugular veins. So if you close off the jugular veins, the blood cannot go into the heart, as a result of which all the vessels become so full, and the little blood vessels burst because they are overfilled. And that process of bursting gives you these little areas of hemorrhage referred to as petechiae. So normally you get them above the area where the neck is occluded. Also on the face, if the child is light-skinned, like in this case, or the adult, then you can see it very well.
Dr. Rao, what opinion do you have of this mark that I've circled on state 63?
Okay, so those are areas where there are abrasions, which means that the force applied and the friction causes the skin actually to come off. So when the skin comes off, those are referred to as abrasions. When the skin is intact and there is injury underneath the skin, those are called bruises or contusions. So she has the bruises or contusions. You can see the blue areas right here, but then she's got these abrasions where the skin is actually rubbed off.
Let me direct your attention. We're going to skip 64 and I'll come back to it. Direct your attention to state 65. You talked about the petechial hemorrhaging. Is it demonstrated more clearly in this photograph?
Yes, so there are a few things you can see right here. Here the skin again is abraded, right there, right here. And it is in a linear pattern, which means that in this case, there was a ligature used to strangle the child. So that force that's exerted by the overlying ligature that's used to strangle the kid actually caused the skin to be abraded.
Let me direct your attention to state 65. Is this a photograph of the opposite side of Cherish's neck as was reflected in the prior photograph?
Yes.
And what do you see in this photograph?
So here again, you can see the bruising right there. You can see bruising right here. And it's in a linear pattern, you can see. And then you get the petechiae right here, and even in the area of the ligature application.
Dr. Rao, can you tell the jury anything about the ligature used to strangle Cherish Periwinkle?
I was not able to actually see. Sometimes you can see the weave of the fabric. I couldn't tell you that, but I could tell you that it was a very broad. It could be a T-shirt that she was wearing, or that was used apart from her clothing to tie it with so much force to give you that ligature mark.
Let me direct your attention to state 67. Does this reflect the right backside of Cherish Periwinkle's neck?
Yes, again, you can see the ligature mark right there, and you can see the contusion, abrasion right here.
State 68, is that the left side of the back of her neck?
Yes, again, you can see the linear pattern.
Let me go back now to states 64. Will you orient the jury to this photograph and explain what is reflected here?
Okay, so you're looking at her mouth and her nose and her chin. So you'll see that all the injuries are in a kind of a linear pattern, which to me indicates that the pressure that was put like that, so you caused all those injuries on that area of the face. So demonstrating this right here, the bruising on the chin, the abrasion on her lip, the abrasion right here, and this is the nose, but the inside down between the nostrils. All, if you look at it, it's like in one pattern. So the effect of smothering or keeping her quiet with force enough to cause those injuries.
Now, these photographs are obviously taken after Cherish Periwinkle's body was cleaned, and yesterday the jury saw photographs of her body as it was collected at the scene. Did you actually see that her nostrils were bleeding from these injuries?
Yes.
Let me direct your attention to state 69. Is this a close-up of the nostrils and upper lip of Cherish Periwinkle?
Yes.
And does this photograph reflect those injuries that you just told the jury about?
Yes.
State 70, also a close-up photograph of the left nostril of Cherish Periwinkle, is that right?
Yes. There's another feature that you can see, because if you look down here, this is the gum margin between her teeth and her gum. So that same pressure caused bleeding into the lining of her gum.
Let me show you state 71, because I think there we can see that bleeding, if you'll point that out.
Yes, you can see the hemorrhage or bleeding between the teeth and the gum margin.
And do you have an opinion as to causation for bleeding in the gum line?
That again is the pressure that was applied to her, the front of her face.
Now, you testified as to petechia in her face, on the skin. Did you also see petechia in both of her eyes?
Yes.
We explained to the jury how petechia in the eye is caused.
Okay, so it's the same concept. When the blood vessels bringing blood back from the brain are so overfilled, they have no place to go because the return path is blocked, as a result of which the vessels rupture. And so in the eyes, which are, the vessels are very delicate, they burst. And the experience is that if the struggle is intense, the area of hemorrhage is large. And if the struggle is not that intense, they're very fine, for example, in the elderly or somebody that is compromised either due to drugs or alcohol.
Now, you mentioned hemorrhaging. So in addition to the petechia that you observed and notated, did Cherish Periwinkle also have hemorrhaging in both of her eyes?
Yes.
And how would you describe that hemorrhaging?
It's large. There are large areas, and the photographs will explain how tremendous the bleeding is.
So we'll next go through the photographs of her eyes. Let me show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 72. Is this a photograph of Cherish Periwinkle's right eye?
Yes.
And will you
Yes.
testify as to the injuries reflected in this photograph?
Okay, so these are the small petechiae that you see right here. When you flip the lid, you're looking into the lid, referred to as the conjunctiva.
Dr. Rao, what is reflected here on her upper eyelid?
Okay, so on the upper eyelid, she has an abrasion, again, where the skin is rubbed off. So a pressure on that area.
Let me show you State 73, also of her right eye. Will you explain to the jury what's reflected here?
Okay, here you can see the extent of the hemorrhage. It's not the fine petechiae, but there is actually bleeding into the conjunctivae that you can see in all these areas right here.
State 74, is this a photograph of the left eye of Cherish Periwinkle?
Yes,
And will you indicate to the jury the injury reflected here?
you have a large area of hemorrhage right there.
State 75, is this the top of that same eye?
Yes, so once the fluid in the eye is removed, you can demonstrate photographically the injuries better. So that's what you're looking at. You're looking at the groove between the upper eyelid and the lower eyelid and the globe of the eye. And so that's what you're looking at right there.
And lastly, State 76, also of her left eye. Will you explain to the jury what's reflected in State 76?
Yes, so again, the fluid is removed and you can see the extent of hemorrhage into the conjunctiva.
You mentioned that you took a sexual battery kit of Cherish Periwinkle the day before you conducted the autopsy. Is that correct?
Yes.
Will you explain to the jury the process you undertake in collecting a rape kit?
Yes, so when the body comes in, nothing is done to the body. Fingernails are examined to see if there are any broken fingernails, because during struggles, on occasion, that happens. So the fingernails are cut and submitted as separate, right hand, left hand fingernails. And after that, the body is placed in a position where one can do a gynecological examination. Of course, this is a child, so that is not the test that we would do on an adult, for example. So photographs are taken, the legs are spread, the anal examination is done first, and the reason for that is if the vaginal examination is done first, because of the situation of how close the anus and the vagina are, maybe the evidence from the vagina, if it's done first, would trickle down into the anus, and that's the reason the anus is done first. So the anus is examined. Swabs are collected. This child does not have any pubic hair because she is really a small girl. So that part of it is not done. Swabs are taken from the anus. Swabs are taken from the vagina. Swabs are taken from the cervix. This girl is a baby, so you cannot see her cervix. So many swabs are taken of the vaginal area. And fluid, we squirt fluid into the vaginal canal, and that is also submitted as evidence. If there is anything extraneous, meaning fibers, hair, that is also collected as it was in this child. And of course, photographs are extensive documenting the process of the injury. And then that is submitted along with blood, DNA card, which we have. We take DNA cards on our homicides, and that is submitted as evidence in the same kit.
Once you take the swabs, do you take care to mark them and refrigerate them?
Yes.
May I approach?
You may.
Let me show you what's been pre-marked for identification as states quadruple E. Ask you if you recognize this exhibit.
Yes, so these are the swabs that are submitted from the office. We have all the kits that are sent to us, and I recognize that. The labels are prepared at the office. My signature and description of what they are is written in my handwriting. So these are the rectal swabs.
Let me show you what's been pre-marked for states identification as states quadruple C. What do you recognize these to be?
Okay, so these are, again, same type of containers, my writing as to indicate what they are, and her label characterizing that it's Cherish Periwinkle.
And these are the vaginal
Vaginal
swabs?
swabs, correct.
Dr. Rao, did you actually, to the naked eye, observe fluid in her vaginal vault before you conducted the swabbing?
Yes,
Let me show you what's been pre-marked as states quadruple D as in dog. Do you recognize those swabs?
yes.
And what are they?
So I took swabs from the top of her pubic area. Instead of, there is no hair, you can't comb it. So I swabbed the area just looking for evidence.
Now, at the medical examiner's office, you all do not conduct laboratory testing on these
No.
swabs. Let me show you what's been pre-marked for identification as states quadruple F as in Frank. Are those the oral swabs that you took from inside Cherish Periwinkle's mouth?
Yes,
You'll note, Dr. Rao, that Cherish is actually spelled incorrectly on these exhibits. We explained to the jury why that is.
yes. So the first day we got information from the stepfather, and he spelled her name like that. The following day, the mother gave the correct spelling, as a result of which we have a discrepancy in her first name.
This time, Your Honor, we tender states quadruple E into evidence, states quadruple F, states quadruple D, and states quadruple C is the next number of exhibits.
All right. Quadruple C will be entered as States Exhibit 80, quadruple D 81, quadruple E 82, and quadruple F 83 in evidence.
So now I'm going to take you through injuries sustained by Cherish Periwinkle to her genitalia. Will you tell the jury before we go through the photographs what you observed?
Okay, so looking at her genital area and her anal area, she had so much trauma. It was all, the anatomy was totally distorted by the injury that she sustained both to her vaginal area and her anus.
Did you actually bring a book with you today that you rely on for anatomical diagrams?
Yes,
And in fact, would an anatomical diagram of a prepubescent female assist you in describing to the jury where genitalia should be on a young girl?
yes.
Let me show you states triple Y. First of all, for the record, will you tell the jury where this anatomical diagram comes from?
Yes, so this is the book, 3rd edition, Pediatric and Adolescent Gynecology, where, it helps doctors to see the anatomy, because even sometimes doctors don't know the anatomy, so that's the reason these diagrams are put out.
And using this diagram, will you please point out, obviously it's reflected, but the vagina and the anus?
Yes, so you can see that the vagina is right here. This area is important when we come to describe injuries, because that is where one passes urine. So there is a distance between the area where one passes urine and the vagina, and there is quite a distance between the vagina and where the anus is. That is a large area of tissue, soft tissue.
Okay, I'm next going to show you state 77, which is a photograph of the genitalia of Cherish Periwinkle. Will you please orient the jury to this photograph and describe the injuries reflected in this photograph?
Yes. So this is without spreading her legs. Normally you can't see this. You won't be able to see this if you look at a little girl, because the fat of the labia cover everything. So, but here, because of the way it is injured, you can actually see into her vagina. So this is where this is the urethra where one passes urine, and you can see how red and swollen that area is. And then you have the vagina, and this is the anus right here. And what is left between the two is a very thin area of tissue. If you bring your minds back to the first diagram, where there was
take you back there.
where there was this broad area right here, it is now reduced to a very thin area of tissue. So anus and vagina.
Okay, we have a couple more pictures of this. 78, will you please orient the jury to the direction of this photograph and explain the injury reflected here?
Okay, so here again, it's not opened or spread to demonstrate. It's just That's how it was because of the tremendous injury that this child sustained. So this is her anus, and then you have that thin tissue between, and this is her vagina.
State 79.
Okay, so close up, this is where you pass urine. You can see how red it is, how swollen it is. This is a vagina, which normally you can't see, and you can see all the tearing there, and you can see the anus. Very thin tissue, you know, it's just, you could feel it, how thin it was.
You mentioned earlier that during an autopsy, you take dissections,
Yes,
and you mentioned that you noticed an area in Cherish's back of her head. Where you,
yes,
So you shaved her head
yes,
and then cut her scalp so you could look at the injury more closely?
yes,
And did you photograph that?
yes.
And what, I'm going to direct your attention now to States 84 and ask you to explain to the jury what is reflected here.
Okay, so when the scalp is reflected back, you have an area of hemorrhage right there.
I'm sorry, where?
On the left side of her scalp, right
Right.
there.
And how is that caused, Dr. Rao?
Blunt trauma.
I'm going to show you 2 more photographs of the dissection taken of Cherish Periwinkle's throat. Will you first tell the jury what you saw when you dissected her throat?
Yes, so what we do is, I'm sorry, I have to take a break. Can I just have like 5 minutes?
Do you want a 5-minute break? I think we'll all take a break for 10 minutes. Thank you.
When you conducted that dissection?
Okay, so it's the neck dissection that we refer to. Anterior, which means front, neck dissection, where you have layer by layer of muscle that is dissected looking for injury as a result of the strangulation.
And what injury did you see?
So she had hemorrhage into the skeletal muscle, the muscles that lie right across right here. And if you turn your neck, you have muscles right here. So she had bleeding into some of those muscles.
Do you also collect clothing from the body when the body comes to the medical examiner's office?
Yes, yes.
Maybe we can step down, Your Honor.
She may.
Dr. Rao, let me show you what's been marked for identification as states Y. Did you look at the packaging of this this morning in your testimony? Yes. And did you identify it as the dress that Cherish Periwinkle was wearing when her body was transferred to the medical examiner's office? Yes. Is this in fact the same packaging from the medical examiner's office from which this dress was originally packaged? Yes. May I publish to the jury?
You may.
I'll tender this, states quadruple Y as the next number exhibit.
Any objection?
No, no, no.
All right, triple Y, or quadruple Y, I'm sorry, would be States Exhibit 84.
Now, in this case, did you also go to the police memorial building to photograph Mr. Smith?
Yes,
Do you see Mr. Smith in court today?
yes.
Will you please point him out and identify an article of clothing he's wearing?
Right there, he's wearing a tan-colored shirt and a checked tie.
Is he seated at a table between 2 lawyers?
Yes,
May the record reflect that the witness, Dr. Rao, has identified the defendant, Donald Smith?
The record will so reflect.
And will you explain to the jury for what purpose you went to the police memorial building?
yes, so after he...
Let me interrupt you real quickly. I should have asked you, on what date did you go to the police memorial building?
On the 22nd of June, 2013.
Approximately what time did you arrive there?
I can't recall.
Okay. And did you, I may have
I
already
think
asked
it was
you
in the
this.
afternoon.
Okay. Did you also direct photography be taken of Mr. Smith?
Yes,
Okay. Dr. Rao, let me direct you to your monitor again. States 89. Does this photograph reflect what Mr. Smith was wearing and what he looked like when you went to the police memorial building on June 22nd, 2013?
Yes.
Let me direct your attention to States 93. Is this a true and accurate photograph of the jeans and the shoes he was wearing?
Yes.
States 94, same question, just a
Yes.
different angle.
Yes.
States 95,
Yes.
States 96,
Yes.
States 97,
Yes.
States 98,
Yes.
States 99.
Yes.
Did you have the opportunity before your testimony this morning to actually look at the clothing that was collected from Mr. Smith on June 22nd?
Yes.
Let me ask you to step down again. Let me show you what's been pre-marked for identification as States quadruple X. Do you recognize this to be the shirt that Mr. Smith was wearing? Yes. May I publish to the jury?
You may, well, any
Let me
objection?
stand here first.
I need to go back after her testimony and get the numbers. I don't think some of these numbers have been entered on the record. Some of these exhibits that were ID'd by letter, and you just went over numbers. So we'll have to go back and do that, but I'll wait and do it when we're through with Dr. Rao.
Dr. Rao. Can you step over here, please? I'll show you what's been remarked as quadruple W. Did you take a look at these this morning for your testimony? And are these in fact the jeans that Donald Smith was wearing on June 22nd? Under quadruple W, may I publish?
You may. No, oh, I'm sorry, thank you. You may publish.
Dr. Rao, did you direct that the defendant be disrobed?
Yes.
And for what purpose?
For purposes of photography and evidence collection.
And specifically, did you want to look at his penis?
Yes.
For what reason?
To make sure that any injuries or any abnormalities be documented and interpreted, because that's what forensic pathologists do. We look at injuries and we interpret injuries.
Let me direct your attention to States Exhibit 9D. Will you please explain to the jury what this photograph is of?
Yes, this is the penis of Mr. Smith, and he does have abnormalities that are trauma-related, meaning injuries.
And will you describe those injuries to the jury?
Yes, so right here you can see that there is a circular bruise of the head of his penis, and he has many areas of bruising on the shaft of his penis.
Dr. Rao, do you have an opinion as to the injury reflected on the head of his penis as to how it could be caused?
Yes,
What is that?
sucking motion with significant force.
Let me show you States 91. Will you orient, are these your gloved hands reflected in this photograph?
Yes.
And will you orient the jury to this photograph, please?
Okay, so this is the top of his penis, and I have extended it so that you can see the bruising better, and you can see the area of bruising on the top, on the outer surface of his penis.
And what if any opinion do you have about the aging of this bruising?
They are fresh injuries consistent with the time frame of the death of this child.
And last photo, States 92. Will you orient the jury to this photograph and explain what injury is reflected in it?
Okay, so this is again the shaft of his penis, meaning the long portion, and you have injuries on the side which are bruising.
Did you also take swabs of his penis and from his mouth?
Yes,
In the same manner that you earlier testified to as taking swabs from the body of Cherish?
yes,
May I approach? Let me show you what's been pre-marked as States quadruple J. Ask if you identify those to be the swabs that you took from the defendant's penis on June 22nd,
yes,
2013.
yes,
Now let me show you what's been pre-marked as States quadruple K and ask if you recognize this exhibit as being the oral swabs that you took from the defendant on June 22nd, 2013.
yes.
Last question for you. I know you explained your opinion as to causing manner of death being strangulation. You know that Cherish's body was discovered in the water.
Yes.
Was there any evidence of drowning?
No.
Thank you. I don't have anything further.
Any questions?
Yes, ma'am, very briefly.
Can we move this one or turn it sideways?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Dr. Rao, when you were present with Mr. Smith, did you have somebody there taking pictures for you?
Yes.
And that was to document any injuries he had to him, right?
Yes.
And every injury would have been documented, right?
Correct.
Okay, did he have any scratches, like on his arms,
No.
on his legs?
No.
Okay. And let me ask you a couple questions, for lack of a better way of saying it, sort of about the mechanics of strangulation. Once a person tightens around another person's neck, you said that death would occur between 3 to 5 minutes later?
If it is not relieved, the pressure that's not relieved, yes.
Okay. And how long before somebody blacks out, if you're putting pressure in that same place?
Probably a couple minutes.
Well, a couple minutes could be 3 minutes, right?
Could be what? Sorry?
2 to 3 minutes, is that what you're saying?
It could be
Because you said that the time that it would take them to die would be 3 minutes.
3 to 5 minutes. Yes.
Well, let me ask you this. Are you familiar with the sport of MMA fighting
No.
or wrestling, any of those things?
Yes.
Okay. 2 trained athletes in a cage, so to speak, and one gets behind the other and starts to choke him, and he goes down because he passes out in about 15 seconds. Have you ever seen that?
Okay, so we'll talk about that a little bit as to what the defense attorney has brought up.
Well, I just wonder, have you ever seen that?
I have read about it.
Okay.
I have not personally witnessed such an event.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
May you redirect?
No, ma'am.
May this witness be excused?
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Rao. We appreciate your time this morning. Before you call your next witness, I need to get the
I think what the confusion was is certain photographs of all 10 ones from Dr. Rao, sequential. I think that I can submit to the court a identified list, and the clerk to see if that clarifies the number of the exhibits.
Okay,
I think some introduced first, but then talked about later.
right.
And I think that's the issue.
Well, you also have a couple that were tendered but not used. Do you, not published, but you still want them numbered? Okay, all right. Madam Clerk, and I'll get it straightened. Oh, you got it. Okay, here's these. Okay, you may call your next witness. Thank you.
Your Honor, the state will call Nicole Lee to the witness stand while she's coming in use the moments of the person.
You may.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Can you please introduce yourself to the jury and state your name and spell it for the court reporter?
My name is Nicole Lee, L-E-E, and I'm employed by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the Jacksonville Regional Crime Laboratory Biology Section.
And what are your duties with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I examine items of evidence for the presence of biological material. I look for such things as semen, saliva, hair root suitable for STR DNA analysis, and I perform the DNA analysis and any statistical calculations that may need to go along with that.
Ma'am, if you could please detail for the jury your training and educational experience that prepared you for your role with FDLE.
I earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Michigan Technological University in the field of clinical laboratory sciences. Once I got the position of crime laboratory analyst with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, I went through 2 separate 2-phase training programs. The first phase of both was learning how to use the testing, the bookwork, written exams, and the second phase of both was supervised casework under qualified analysts. The first set of training was to identify the biological materials, and the second set of training was specific to the DNA analysis.
And so how long have you been working in the capacity as a biological analyst with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I've been with the department for 20 years, and I think I've been an analyst for 18 years.
And can you explain your duties and what you do on a day-to-day basis with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the biology section?
Sure. I receive evidence from our evidence intake section through a controlled process. Once I have evidence in my custody, I go through it visually to examine it, to identify the stains for DNA testing, and then I take it through the DNA testing. Upon completion of my testing, there are several reviews that the evidence goes through. Data review by a qualified analyst, a technical review of my complete work and the reported conclusions I have by a qualified analyst, and then the last review is an administrative review done by one of the supervisors prior to the case being released. Then at that point it's completed, and I return the evidence back to our evidence intake section to be returned to the submitting agency.
And if I could you please take the jury through the process of the training when it comes to specifically STR DNA analysis and the type of analysis that you conduct at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
The training is involved. I think right now it takes about a year to get through the entire training process. And you start with such things as known samples, so we know what results you should get. And it's just a way to learn the testing, get familiarized with the testing, how big of a sample to take. There's written examinations, there are oral examinations, and then once you have passed all of this, then you go through the supervised casework, where you're actually working casework with qualified analysts before you are qualified to do it on your own.
And specifically, during the course of the training at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, do you become proficient and do you, in essence, go to school on the various techniques and the methodologies utilized to conduct DNA testing in a forensic setting?
Yeah, the testing is broken down into modules, and I believe there are 11 modules, and each is specific. For example, within the DNA training, there's a statistics module. There's a mixture module to help you identify mixtures and how to interpret mixtures in the DNA results. There's a basic DNA module to ensure that you have learned and are quite familiar with the basic structure of DNA. And then, oh gosh, I forgot where I was going with that.
You were talking about the training modules.
So then, once you get through these training modules, you are proficient and certified by the state to complete analysis on independent casework. Once you are out of training, there are rules in place to take a proficiency test, which is an external exam that's purchased by the department for you to take on a semi-annual basis to ensure that you maintain the level of testing that is expected.
And let me go back for a second and discuss with you the statistical module that I think you just briefly mentioned. Is a portion of your DNA training understanding the statistics and the numerical importance of the findings that you make when you are doing the DNA testing?
Yes, it is important to us within the department to have a strong statistical background and an understanding of how the statistics are applied. Because if I say that two DNA profiles match without giving weight to it through statistical analysis, we can't really say how common or how rare that profile is. When I give it statistical weight, that helps understand how unique that profile is in the given population.
And have you been educated and become proficient in the population statistical analysis that accompanies DNA testing so that not only can you conduct the testing, but then you can interpret those results to give meaning to the results?
Yes.
And is that a part of your standard training through the Department of Law Enforcement before you become a certified DNA analyst?
Yes, and it is a continued part of my work as a DNA analyst.
Now, you've been working in the DNA field, you said, for 18 years?
Yes.
Okay. Obviously, there have been advancements in the technologies that have been utilized, correct?
Correct.
As a part of your training and as part of your continuing education with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, do you keep abreast of new technologies and new advancements in the field?
Yes.
Do you attend continuing education trainings and seminars to make sure that you are current with all the new technologies that are available in forensic settings?
Yes, I was just at external training last week, as a matter of fact.
Okay. And do you do so to maintain your expertise and maintain your proficiency as a DNA analyst with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes.
You discussed certification. Give me a little bit more background in regards to the certification process.
The certification process is led by the department through our technical leaders. And they take into account your ability to pass the written exams, the oral exams that are given, as well as culminating in what's referred to as a mock trial to ensure that you have the proficiency needed and required of the position.
So you said you've been an analyst for 18 years. So has it been 18 years since you've been certified as an expert in the field of forensic DNA analysis through the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes, I have gone through additional training programs as we updated our technologies. I wouldn't consider that a recertification process, but again, it's something that throughout my years I have undergone additional testing on these new technologies.
Throughout the course of your 18 years, approximately how many times have you been asked to conduct DNA analysis on potential evidence in criminal investigations?
At this time, I've released over 2,000 reports. Those aren't necessarily individual cases. Some cases have multiple reports. I don't keep track of the amount of times I've done DNA testing. It's been a bunch.
And do you also maintain a record, or have you been tendered as an expert in the field of DNA identification and population statistics through the course of your duties with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
Yes, and I don't have an exact count of the number of times, but I believe it's about 135 to 140 times.
So you've testified as an expert witness 100 to 150 times, or what were the numbers again?
I think between 135 and 140.
135, 140. Is that here in the state of Florida?
Yes.
Is it in state court and other jurisdictions as well?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would tender Ms. Lee as an expert in the field of DNA analysis and population statistics related to that analysis.
No question, Your Honor.
All right, she'll testify in that regard.
Now, Ms. Lee, I'd like to direct your attention to the field of DNA analysis before we get into your specific casework. Could you explain to the jury members how it is that you begin your work once you receive a piece of evidence for possible analysis?
So the first thing I do when I get the evidence is I examine the packaging and make notes on the packaging of the evidence. And then I open it, and I do all of this in a clean work environment with all of my personal protective equipment on to ensure that I'm not introducing my own DNA to the evidence as I'm looking at it. And the first things I'm going to look for is the condition of the evidence and if there's any staining or hair-like fibers present. I'll then microscopically examine any hair-like fibers or collect them to be examined later, and then I can do what's referred to as conventional serology testing on any stains to identify, if I can identify the origin of these biological materials before taking it through the DNA process, which has many steps. Would you like me to go into those now?
Well, and before you go to those steps, if you could explain to the members of the jury how DNA is used for identification purposes, and then what steps you take to try to identify DNA on items of evidence.
So the type of DNA that I look at is nuclear DNA. It's found in the nucleus of cells, and it's inherited from your parent. So one individual has half their DNA from their mother and half from their father. So what I'm looking for are these areas on the DNA molecule that are different between individuals. We know that greater than 99% of our DNA as humans is the same. So what I'm looking at are these areas that can differentiate. The areas that I look at are kind of the placeholders between what determines your hair color, your eye color, and that sort of thing. And by looking at these areas, they are the same throughout your body. So if I'm looking at a buccal swab or an oral swab, it should be the same as if I have a blood standard. And then I make a comparison of DNA that I get from evidence to DNA that I obtain from known individuals.
Now, when you're looking at profiles, who selects the markers that you look at? Is it standardized throughout the course of the field of forensic DNA analysis?
Yes, it is.
Can you explain how that works?
Sure. Within the department, we purchase a kit that contains the markers that we're interested in testing. And we do these kits because they have been optimized for forensic testing. A lot of times the samples we get are not clean, pristine samples. They've been out in the environment. So the companies or research that has been done into these kits has optimized them so that they're easy for me and anyone else in the forensic field to work with and to compare across samples and states, different cases.
Now, forensic DNA, oftentimes we're talking about very small amounts of DNA that we're analyzing or that are left behind, correct?
Yes.
How do you go about amplifying or looking at that DNA in the trace amounts to be able to make an identification as to what profiles or what DNA is present on a piece of evidence?
So one of the steps is amplification, and that's the step that we're talking about. When I find a sample that is a biological material that I want to attempt to develop a profile from, I take it through this little molecular Xerox copy machine. And essentially this is cycling through temperatures to mimic the process that naturally occurs in our body where a chain of DNA is copied or it's replicated to make it longer. Only I'm copying just those areas I'm interested in. If we think of DNA like a book, what I'm photocopying is a specific word in a specific. I'm not doing the whole chapter because I'm not interested in looking at all of it. This amplification allows me to target the sweet spot of DNA. Much like taking a photograph, if I have too much DNA, when it comes time to visualize it in the last step, it's overwhelming, kind of like taking a picture and using a flash when you don't need it. It's a sunny day. You don't get a clear picture. And it also allows me, if the sample is very, very small, making these copies can produce enough that I can see a result or get a profile.
What is the usefulness of DNA in a forensic setting? An example is, does each individual person have their own independent DNA?
Yes, aside from identical twins, we each have our own inherited profile from our parents. Siblings will have similar profiles, but it is not exact. I can differentiate between siblings of parents. What I cannot differentiate is identical twins.
And so basically, every person has their own genetic fingerprint, per se, that identifies them. And aside from that occasion of identical twins, each individual person, even in this courtroom, if we're not twins with one another, will have a different DNA profile.
Yes. Again, that's if I'm looking at multiple markers on the DNA profile. If I'm just looking at one area, many people can have the same profile. Kind of like a phone number. If you have a Jacksonville phone number, you have a 904 area code. Looking at just those 3 numbers, I can't differentiate individuals. But when I take into the entirety of the phone number, I can differentiate people. Same thing with the DNA. As long as I'm looking at enough markers or enough areas on the DNA, I can differentiate individuals.
Directing your attention to the work that you conducted in the case of the state of Florida versus Donald Smith, how many individual markers were you utilizing at that point in time to conduct your DNA analysis?
15 different markers plus a gender marker referred to as amylogenin.
Can you explain to the jury how you utilize the data received when it comes to those 15 markers, and then use your experience and your training in population statistics to gather an importance or qualify how much DNA is there and who it belongs to?
The easiest way for me to do that is to use an example. So when I have a DNA profile, what I'm looking at are numbers for each of the markers. So at each of these 15 places, I may have a 14, 15. So then what I'm doing is trying to see how many times has that 14 and 15 together been seen in the population to get an estimation of how common or how rare it is. The easiest way for me to explain that is to think of a group of 10 individuals. And I want to know how many of those 10 individuals have red hair. One of them does. So they're 1 in 10. Now my next question is how many of this in this group have red hair and are wearing red shoes? Happens to be the same individual. They have red hair and they have red shoes. So they're 1 in 10 for having red hair and 1 in 10 for having red shoes. And I can combine that. Now they're 1 in 100. So the rarity of finding someone with red hair and red shoes is 1 in 100, even though I've only looked at a database of 10 people, because these things are additive. They combine together to get a bigger rarity or frequency.
And so what you're looking at is how rare this profile is and the chances that it may be matched to another person who may be walking this earth, that type of thing.
Right. I utilize this database to see how many times it has been seen to then calculate out how common or how rare I would expect it to be.
And again, this population database, who maintains this database?
The database that I used at the time, goodness, I don't remember who maintains it. It was published in the Journal of Forensic Science. So it is in a peer-reviewed journal that anyone can use because it has been found to be valid. It's gone through statistical analysis by statisticians to ensure that it's a validated database. And once it's published, I can use it within the department for our purposes.
And is that the same population database that's utilized in law enforcement across the country?
At the time, yes.
Now, directing your attention specifically to the summer of 2013 and your work in this particular case, can you please tell the jury how you first became involved in this case of the state of Florida versus Donald Smith?
I became involved in this case the same as any case in the laboratory. It was just happened to be assigned to me on that particular day.
And when did you first receive items of evidence in this case for possible DNA analysis?
I picked up the evidence in my custody on June 25th of 2013.
And could you just enumerate for the members of the jury the items of evidence that you did receive in this particular case?
At that time, I received multiple items. Would you like me to list all of them?
If you could, just list down what you originally received, and then we'll get into our work on those items.
I had a collection that was collected from under the nails of Donald Smith's left hand, samples from under the nails of Donald Smith's right hand, buccal swab collected from Donald Smith, the actual fingernail clippings from Donald Smith, a penile swab from Donald Smith, a swab from a Walmart bag, a swab from a piece of a Walmart bag, a swab of a tree log, a swab of Cherish Periwinkle's neck, a sexual assault kit collected from Cherish Periwinkle. Within that were oral swabs, vaginal swabs, mons pubis and labia swabs, anal swabs, right breast swabs, left breast swabs, hairs, possible hairs that were collected from the vaginal and anal area, her fingernail clippings, her pulled head hair, a vaginal smear slide, an anal and an oral smear slide, a pair of jeans from Donald Smith, a blood spot card from Cherish Periwinkle, and additional swabs that were collected from Cherish Periwinkle.
Now, as a part of your duties as a DNA analyst for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, do you work with investigators and try to identify specific pieces of evidence that may be more relevant and more probative to produce DNA evidence?
Yes, when I have a large list of evidence like this, I try to focus my initial testing on specific samples rather than just diving in and testing it all at once.
And specifically, what items did you want to look at first when it came to this evidence to determine what would be more probative for the purpose of law enforcement investigation?
In this case, I began with the sexual assault kit and the items contained within it.
Your Honor, may I approach the witnesses?
You may.
First, I see her.
Okay.
And I'm now approaching what has been previously marked as State's Exhibit 81. Can you please describe what's contained in State's Exhibit 81?
This is the swabs that I received of the mons pubis and labia.
If we could just set that down for a second. Now showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 82.
Do you want me to identify what they are?
Yes, you identify what they are.
Yes, these are the rectal or the anal swabs that were in the sexual assault kit.
State's Exhibit 83, could you please identify that and how you recognize it?
These are the oral swabs from inside the sexual assault kit. I recognize them by my handwritten case number, exhibit number, and the dates of examination.
And State's Exhibit 80. Again, how do you recognize it and what does it appear to be?
And these are the vaginal swabs from inside the sexual assault kit that I received that have my handwritten markings on them.
So when you conducted your analysis of those particular swabs and those particular items, did you first review those items for possible serology to determine whether or not there was the presence of semen?
Yes, I did.
Can you explain to the jury how you performed that analysis before you go to the DNA analysis?
The identification of semen is a two-step process. The first thing I do is a color change test. It's basically taking a very small sample of one of these cotton tip swabs, applying this chemical to it to see if there is a color change. If there's a color change, it gives me indication that semen may be present. I take that same cutting to the next step, which is to make a microscope slide, which I then examine for the actual visualization of sperm cells and their presence on the swab on the slide.
May I approach the witness again?
You may.
I'm now showing you what's been previously moved into evidence in State's Exhibit 87, identified as the penile swab from the defendant in this particular case. Do you recognize that exhibit as well?
Again, I do. My handwritten notations are on the swab as well as on the packaging, as well as the yellow FTLE label that was applied when it came into the evidence intake section.
Now, once you go through the step one process where you're looking for the color change to determine whether or not there is the possibility of semen there, and then you go to the microscopic analysis, how do you prepare slides for that analysis?
So I take that very small cutting from the swab and I put it in what's called a microcentrifuge tube. And it's a very small tube. It's maybe 1.5 inches big. It allows me to add a few drops of liquid to it, at which point the sperm cells can be released from the cotton swab into solution. I can spin those cells down and they form a pellet, or they just all kind of clump together at the bottom of that tube. And then I can take them from the tube, put them onto a glass slide. I dry them so they're heat affixed to that slide. And then I add 2 different stains to the slide. The stains allow me to more easier visualize the sperm cells, separate from any skin cells that may also be present on the side. And then I put that in the microscope and just look at it to identify what structures are present.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness again?
You may.
I'm now showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit Z for identification purposes. Do you recognize that exhibit?
I do. These are slides that I prepared from the samples in the sexual assault kit.
And is this a composite exhibit containing all the slides that you prepared in this case?
Yes, there are multiple slides within that little plastic case.
And are they in the same or substantially the same condition as they were when you prepared them and then returned them to law enforcement?
It appears that the case is still sealed as when I sent it back out of the laboratory.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the State removed State's Exhibit quadruple Z into evidence as the next number exhibit.
Okay, I think it's exhibit number 103. Is that correct, Madam Clerk? That'll be entered as State's Exhibit 103 if there's no objection.
No legal objection, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Now, individually, let me go through each one of the exhibits. Did you prepare, in fact, a smear slide of the swabbing that was conducted of the defendant's penis in State's Exhibit 87?
I did.
And once you prepared the slide and reviewed it microscopically, could you determine whether or not there was the presence of semen or sperm on those slides?
Yes.
Explain that process to the jury and explain what you found.
So when I made that slide and I looked at it through my microscope, what I saw were sperm cells, or in my notes what I refer to as sperm heads, present. I saw them about one head per every 3 to 5 fields that I looked at on that microscope slide.
And what type of volume is that when you're looking at one head per field of view?
It's a fair amount. If we had what referred to as a neat semen stain, where it's just straight semen on a slide, I would be looking at sperm cells that are too numerous to count in each of those fields. And because it's less than that, but there's still many present on the slide, it's a pretty good amount of semen present. I don't quantify it any further than to just say how many I saw when I was looking at it.
Okay. So in short, the swabs of the defendant's penis show that he has semen or sperm on those swabs.
That's correct.
Let me move on to some of the swabs that were taken from the sexual assault kit. First, starting with State's Exhibit 83, which are the oral swabs that were taken from the victim when the sexual assault kit was conducted.
Yes, when I was looking at the slide that I prepared from these swabs, the notation I made was that they were rare, meaning that they were not as common. They did not show up in every field, or even every 3 to 5 fields. Again, I didn't make a numerical notation as to how many sperm cells I saw, just that they were rare.
But based upon your observations microscopically and the results from the oral swabs, Cherish Periwinkle had sperm or semen in her mouth.
That's correct. The oral swabs are positive for the presence of semen.
Moving on to the other swabs that were taken and identified from the sexual assault kit. First, showing you what's been marked and moved into evidence at State's Exhibit 81, the mons pubis or labia swabs from Cherish Periwinkle.
Again, I took this through the process of making a microscope slide. It was semen positive. I did identify sperm cells. I did not quantify how much, other than it was rare, but semen was present on the mons pubis and labia swabs.
Next, State's Exhibit 80 in evidence, the vaginal swabs from Cherish Periwinkle.
And these were the same. Semen was present. I did identify a rare amount of sperm cells, so these are semen positive as well.
And then last, State's Exhibit 82, which is the rectal swabs from Cherish Periwinkle taken when the sexual assault kit was conducted.
These were also positive for the presence of semen. On these samples, I was able to identify a range of 1 to 5 sperm cells present per each individual field that I looked at. So semen positive for the rectal swabs.
So there was actually more semen present in the rectal swabs than any of the other swabs that you had viewed under the microscope.
Yes, there were many more sperm heads present in each of the fields that I looked at.
In layman's terms, just to summarize, Cherish Periwinkle had sperm or semen in her vaginal area, in her vaginal swabs, and then also inside her rectum, based upon the evidence contained on these swabs.
As well as in her buccal swabs, yes.
Now, Ms. Lee, during the course of your evaluation of this evidence, did you use the evidence that you just discussed, the presence of sperm and the number of sperm present, to determine what samples may be best used for DNA analysis?
Yes, I did.
And how do you go about that process?
In this instance, I began with the sample that had the most amount of semen identified. So the anal swabs is what I first took through the DNA process.
And did you also, I think you enumerated this when you went through the list of items that you received, did you also conduct DNA analysis on the next swabs from Cherish Periwinkle that you received during the course of the work in this case?
I did do some testing on that next swab, yes.
I'm now showing you what's been previously marked for identification purposes as State's Exhibit 45. Do you recognize that exhibit?
I do.
And how do you recognize that exhibit?
Again, the packaging that's present has the FDLE identifying label that was applied when it came into the department, as well as my handwritten initials, case number and exhibit number, a date that I examined it, both on the outer packaging as well as on the inner packaging of the swab.
Now, in regards to the next swabs from Cherish Periwinkle's neck, Can you explain the difference for the type of DNA that you're looking for in a neck swab versus swabs that show the presence of semen or bodily fluids?
In this instance, I did not attempt to look for semen. I did not do any of that initial testing. I took a sample straight through the DNA process in an attempt to identify any skin cells that may be present that did not belong to Cherish Periwinkle.
Also, as a portion of the evidence that you received, you also received what we call the known standard or oral swabs from the defendant, in this case, Don Smith.
I did.
I'm now showing you what's been previously marked and moved into evidence in State's Exhibit 88. Do you recognize that exhibit?
I do. Again, it has all of the FDLE markings as well as my own markings. And this is the oral swab that I tested from Donald Smith.
Okay, and so this is the known standard that was obtained from the defendant in this case.
Yes.
Let me go back and retrieve one of the swabs.
Now we're going to present to you State's Exhibit 82, which was the rectal swab that you identified, that you selected out of the sex kit would be the most probative when it came to DNA analysis.
Yes,
And again, that was because it appeared that there was more DNA present based upon the microscopic analysis.
that's correct.
And you can just set that down right there for a second. When you go to this next phase of actually conducting DNA analysis on the swabs that you've taken, can you explain how that's done to the jury?
The DNA testing is a multi-step process. Just like I did in the initial testing to identify semen, I take a piece of the swab, put it into another one of those microcentrifuge tubes, and I start the DNA process. The first thing I need to do is extract those cells off of the swab and get them into solution, and then I extract the DNA from the cells present. So extraction is the first step. The next step is quantitation, and this is just where I get a rough estimate of how much DNA is present. And that's important, as we discussed in the next step, which is amplification, to know how much DNA I have. I always try to target that sweet spot. I don't want to have too little, and I don't want to have too much. So after amplification is the visualization process, and I use a genetic analyzer, which is just an instrument that can see the DNA. What I see is a series of spikes or peaks and valleys on a graph, and then I compare the peaks from the unknown sample or the evidence sample to the profiles that I develop from the known individuals, which is the same process of extraction, quantitation, amplification, and then getting that, what we refer to as an electropharogram, or the visual representation of the DNA.
So once you go through this process, is it your hopes to, at all the markers that you're testing for, obtain DNA profiles that can be interpreted for evidentiary purposes?
Yes, I always start the process attempting to obtain complete DNA profiles, which means I would get results at all of the 15 markers that I've tested. As I said before, a lot of times the samples that I get from an evidence sample are not pristine. They have been in the environment. They could be dirty. They may be very limited. So it's not unusual to get an incomplete profile. And this just means that I did not get results at all of the markers I attempted. It doesn't mean that the DNA has changed in any way. It just means I can only see a portion of it. I didn't get all of the results.
Let me talk about that for a second. You said things from the environment. Obviously, if the DNA sample was exposed to water, to air, to dirt, things of that nature, would that affect your ability to potentially obtain a full profile or a profile at all?
So DNA is really well protected in the nucleus of the cell. In a dry state, that's in a temperature-controlled environment, it can be tested many, many, many years out. Things that start to break down or degrade the DNA, if we have bacteria present, that will chew up the DNA and allow me to not get a complete profile or no profile. Sunlight can degrade DNA. Moisture can be bad in such that it allows for the growth of bacteria or mold, which can inhibit my results, but it also can have the effect of just washing away the DNA or diluting it out to the point that I can't see it. There are factors in dirt that can inhibit DNA. There's a lot going against me in the environment if a sample is not dry and clean and protected, stored in an envelope like it comes into the laboratory.
So exposure of the victim's body to the elements, to water, to air, to things of that nature, all that could affect the ability to get full profiles.
That's correct.
Now, specifically, did you run and obtain a DNA profile of the defendant's known sample, which was the buccal swab that was taken from the defendant, in this case, Donald Smith?
I did.
And were you able, based upon those samples that were obtained from the defendant, to obtain a full known profile of the defendant?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm now showing you what's been previously marked for identification purposes is 5A. Do you recognize this exhibit?
I do.
And how do you recognize this exhibit?
This is a representation of the summary sheet that's in my case file of the profile that I obtained from Donald Smith. I recognize it because I previously had a chance to examine it and compare it to my case file, and my initials are present on the board.
Okay. And so this exhibit exactly mirrors the work that you conducted in this case and the profiles that were developed when it came to the known sample of the defendant, Donald Smith.
That's correct. I think this is his oral swab.
Your Honor, at this point in time, the state will move into evidence. State's Exhibit 5A and is the next numbered exhibit.
Any objection?
No legal objection.
All right, that'll be entered as State's Exhibit 104 in evidence.
And Your Honor, with the court's permission, may I have Ms. Lee step down to explain the exhibits in the court.
She may. You may.
Ms. Lee, if you could please stand and sort of face towards the court. We're trying to get your voice up so that everything is on record. And I'll serve as your reason, I guess, with lack of a better term. Would you please explain to the members of the jury what's depicted on this exhibit and how the DNA profile was obtained and then useful in your examination?
Sure, so what you have here are two columns. The first column is the 15 markers that I actually tested for, plus this gender marker, amylogenin. Starting with amylogenin, you can see I obtained an XY, that's a male profile. If it was a female, it would be an XX. Looking at each of the other markers or areas that I tested, you can see there are two numbers. So let's start with the column. Sample ID is my exhibit number in the process. Came into me as exhibit 3, all through my testing it was exhibit 3, and it was a sample from Donald Smith. I obtained these results on the 9th of July, 2013. So this first marker that I looked at is DS1179, D8S1179, and I obtained a 1013. Mr. Smith inherited a 10 from one parent and a 13 from the other parent. Without parent samples, I have no way to differentiate who gave him which allele. Each of these independent numbers is referred to as allele. And as you go through the process, you see I have two alleles at each of the markers. If you look at D21S11, I have two 30s. He's a 30-30, that's called a homozygous. That just means each parent gave him a 30. So this is the result of taking it through the extraction, quantitation, amplification, and then each of these numbers would have been a peak on that graph. So there would have been a peak here, and that represents the 10, and a separate peak, a couple spots over representing the 13.
So you looked at all these locations, and this is the genetic inheritance that he got from his parents that developed his personal profile.
That's correct.
Thank you. Ridiculous. I'm now showing you what's been previously marked for identification purposes as 5B. And if you could please examine the exhibit. Do you recognize the exhibit?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize it to be?
This is a chart from my case file that has the profile from Mr. Smith and the profile that I obtained from the neck swab.
And is this an exact reproduction of the work that you conducted in this case to demonstrate the profiles that were developed off of the neck swab that was taken from Cherish Periwinkle?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would move State's Exhibit 5B into evidence as the next number exhibit.
No legal objection.
All right, that'll be entered as State's Exhibit 105 in evidence.
And this is one, that's 104. Yes. And again, Your Honor, may I have a little step down to explain what these exhibits to the members of the jury?
She may.
Yeah, I have three positions.
You may.
So State's Exhibit 45 is the next swab taken from Cherish Periwinkle, and I'll insert that onto the exhibit. Could you please explain to the members of the jury the DNA profile that you obtained from that swab from the neck of Cherish Periwinkle? And why don't we get just a little bit of this evidence?
So this chart has 4 columns. The first column is the same as on the last chart. It has all the markers that I tested. The last column is the same as the last chart. It's the profile from Donald Smith. So these middle 2 ones are the profile from Cherish Periwinkle's neck swab. The first of these 2 columns has a mixture. So what you see here are more than 2 alleles at most of the markers. So my DNA results, I had 10, 13, 14. When I compared Cherish Periwinkle's profile, it's her neck, so it doesn't surprise me that I have her DNA present. When they swabbed her neck, her cells came off as well. So what I do is I say, if this is her profile, I want to know what's left over. What is that foreign result? And that is what this third column is. So 9 foreign are the results that could not have come from Cherish Periwinkle. And when I compare the results that I have at all of those markers to the profile from Donald Smith, they are a match. There are no differences as you go down the line.
So you saw the exact DNA profile belonging to this defendant on the touch DNA that was recovered from the victim's neck in this case.
That's correct.
Okay, you can take a look at this. Ms. Lee, if I could, can I have you explain the statistical importance or value of an exact profile match in this particular case?
So to say that Mr. Smith matches the profile from her neck, without giving you the weight or how rare it is in the population, it may turn out, if I don't let you know that I calculated these statistics and how rare it is, without telling you that, it could be seen in every person in the population. So I give weight to it to let us know the rarity or how many times you'd expect to see that population.
Okay, and what was the population statistical analysis with this particular profile, the foreign profile that was recovered from the victim's neck?
For unrelated individuals, it is approximately 1 in 35 quintillion.
How many zeros?
So if you think about your numbers, you have 100, 1,000, million, billion, trillion, quadrillion, quintillion.
So how many people walk the face of the earth at this point in time?
Right now, the estimate is between 7 and 7.5 billion individuals.
So given the statistical analysis in this case, the population of the earth and the profile that you obtained, can you say, in your expert opinion, that this was an exact match to the defendant's DNA profile?
I can look at the chart and see that it's an exact match. This rarity of 35 quintillion makes it extremely rare in the population.
Meaning with that many zeros on the end of that profile, that the likelihood of it being somebody else other than this defendant is beyond rare, beyond unlikely.
Short of an identical twin, I would not expect to see this exact profile at random in the population.
So the defendant's DNA was around the victim's neck.
It was on the neck swab, yes.
Moving on to State's Exhibit 5C in evidence. Can you please examine that exhibit? Do you recognize it?
I do. This is a chart of the results that I obtained from the anal or the rectal swab.
And is this an exact reproduction of the work that you conducted on the anal swabs in this case?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, we would move into evidence State's Exhibit 5C, and it's the next exhibit, which I believe is 106.
No legal objection.
All right, that'll be entered as State's Exhibit 106.
And again, Your Honor, may have the witness step down.
She may. And you may reposition.
And again, State's Exhibit 82 were the rectal swabs that were taken from the victim during the course of the sex assault case, correct?
Yes.
And you had already determined, based upon microscopic analysis, that the swabs contained the presence of semen, correct?
Yes.
So there were actually sperm within the field when we looked at it, so you could identify that, and then it was larger than the other swabs that you looked at.
That's correct.
Can you please explain the DNA analysis on the rectal swabs and their importance when compared to the defendant, in this case, Donald Smith?
So just like the last chart, again, column 1 are the markers that I tested. Column 4 is a profile from Donald Smith. The second column is the profile that I obtained from the anal and the rectal swabs. And again, the results that I obtained were a mixture. Not surprising that Cherish Periwinkle was present on her own anal swab or her rectal swab. So again, I used her profile that I obtained from her blood standard, and we backed out what had to come from her to see what was left. And this third column is the foreign results from the mixture column. So this is the male profile that was obtained from the anal swab, and when I compared it to the profile from Donald Smith, there were no inconsistencies. They were an exact match.
Okay, and again, obviously consistent, if we're talking about sperm and semen coming from a male contributor, and that's indicated by the XY in the animal gene, correct?
That's correct.
And then all the other markers that you in other forensic settings test for was the foreign mixture or the foreign profile an exact match to the defendant, Donald Smith.
Yeah, for example, if I cover these columns and didn't tell you which was the foreign column or which was the column from Donald Smith, there would be no way to differentiate them because they are exactly the same.
Thank you for based upon the fact that it's the exact same 15 marker profile, did the same statistics apply to this particular sample?
Yes.
And so, again, how many zeros is that, or what was the statistical analysis for that?
The number was 1 in 35 quintillion.
And again, based upon population studies and the weight of this is an exact of the defendant, correct?
Yes.
And so the semen that was located inside her anus at the time of the sexual assault kit matches the DNA profile of the defendant.
Yes.
To that many numbers, the likelihood would be, absent an identical twin, that it would be, in all likelihood, the defendant's DNA profile.
That's correct.
Now, given those numbers, no margin for error. This was an exact profile at all the markers that we're talking about.
Looking at the results, it is an exact match, and the frequency of occurrence of that profile is extremely rare.
Thank you. At a later point in time, that was your original analysis, correct? It was originally reported out?
Yes.
At the request of the state of Florida, did you go back and review all the other items that were present but maybe did not indicate as much DNA in the microscopic analysis?
Yes.
Can you explain to the members of the jury the results that you obtained on that analysis when you went through the second time? Were you able to find the presence of DNA on other swabs, such as the swabbings from the mouth, the swabbings from the mom's pubis?
Yes. I went back and attempted to obtain a DNA profile from the oral swabs as well as from the vaginal swabs.
Starting with oral swabs, what were your results?
For the oral swabs, I had no results foreign to Cherish Periwinkle. So the only results that I saw were consistent with her.
Now, when you come to that, microscopically, you saw a sperm head in the swabs that were within her mouth, correct?
Correct.
What would explain why no DNA profile formed to Cherish Periwinkle existed? If you saw sperm, and obviously they did not get there from the victim herself.
There just wasn't enough sperm cells present or foreign male DNA present for me to detect it within the mixture of her DNA results.
Now, that being said, we talked about some of the factors that come into play, such as water. Water could wash away the DNA.
Yes.
If the victim was submerged in water, that could be a factor in why those results were not there.
Yeah, and as an oral swab, I don't know how it got there or what happened after it may have been deposited in her mouth. Such things as eating or drinking, rinsing your mouth can also wash it away.
Did you also look at the mons pubis swab that was previously moved into evidence and shown to you?
You may.
The oral swabs that we just discussed were States Exhibit 83. The States Exhibit 81, which is the mons pubis and labia swabs, did you also review those for possible DNA analysis?
Yes, but I did not do any additional DNA testing on those swabs.
Okay, because you were testing the anal swab area and then followed up with the vaginal swab area, correct?
Yes.
So now moving on to the vaginal swabs that Cherish Periwinkle was moved into evidence in States Exhibit 80, did you conduct DNA analysis on those swabs?
I did.
Okay. And were you able to obtain a full 15-marker DNA profile from the foreign DNA that was obtained on those swabs?
No. On the vaginal swabs, I had an incomplete foreign profile. So I was not able to get all of the results at all of the markers that I attempted.
What are some factors that can make a profile incomplete with the foreign profile?
Again, if there's just not enough of the foreign profile present, it may result in a partial profile. If it is a mixture of, in this instance, Cherish Periwinkle and the foreign profile, I may not be able to differentiate what came from Ms. Periwinkle and what came from this foreign donor. I can see that there are results there, that there is another person there, but I can't always differentiate them.
Your Honor, may I approach you, please?
You may.
I'm now showing you what's been previously marked for identification as 5D. Do you recognize that chart as you did the previous charts?
I do.
And does States Exhibit 5D exactly duplicate or replicate the work that you conducted on the vaginal swabs in this particular case?
Yes.
And does it demonstrate not only the foreign profile, but also the defendant's known profile in that exhibit?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point in time, I would move 5D into evidence as 107.
No legal objection.
All right.
107.
That'll be entered as States Exhibit 107. That's 5D.
And as before, Your Honor, may have a witness step down and discuss this.
You may.
Now, States Exhibit 80, which is where the vaginal swab's taken from the victim. Can you explain to the jury what's depicted in the chart and explain specifically where there were locations that you did not obtain all the information for a full profile?
Just like the previous charts, 4 columns. The last column is Mr. Smith. The first column are the markers that I tested. And then this second column is the mixture I obtained from the vaginal swab. Again, you see there are multiple areas that have more than 2 leads. And as you go down the chart for what I pulled out as the foreign, after backing out her profile that I expect to see on her vaginal swab, what I'm left with at the first row is, which is D8S1179, 1013, matches Mr. Smith. D21S11, 3030, matches Mr. Smith. Down at D7S820, the third of the markers, I have a 10 plus. That means I know the foreign individual had to donate the 10 to that mixture. The plus indicates I don't know what the partner allele is. It could be a 10-10, it could be a 10-11, it could be a 10-12. I can't make that determination from that mixture. There's just not enough information. It's not distinguishable enough for me to know what that extra allele is. I can compare that to Donald Smith and see that he does have a 10, which matches him. Because I don't know what that other allele is, I cannot make a comparison. This is considered as being a match within the inclusion event, because it's not a 10-13, which would be different.
And let's clarify that. We've already talked about profile matches and how the first 2 exhibits matched him exactly. If one of these 2 alleles is different than the defendant's in the foreign profile, can you definitively exclude him as a contributor to that mixture?
Right. If I say this foreign donor has to have donated an allele that he doesn't have, then it can't have been him that donated it. By not knowing what that second allele is, that doesn't exclude him. That says he still has the 10, so he's still included there. The next marker where I have the CSF1PO and it says not determined, the results that I obtained were in 1113. At that marker, Cherish Periwinkle is in 1113, so I can't make any determination as to what the additional person donated. It turns out that Mr. Smith has an 1113, so he's not excluded from that. I also can't make any determination as what that foreign person is there. And then the next one is D3S 1358. I was able to identify an 18 as a foreign individual. What the partner is to that 18, I don't know. I can still compare that to Mr. Smith. He is an 18. Also, there is a 16 within the profile. He's not excluded. He would be included in that marker as well.
And was there another marker which was less than a exact match?
Yes, thank you. D16 S539, the foreign donor has to be an 11. Again, with these other ones, there's a plus there because I don't know what the missing allele is, the second allele, or what we refer to as the sister allele. But I can make that comparison to Mr. Smith and see that he does have an 11 present.
Definitively, you cannot exclude Mr. Smith from being a contributor to this profile, can you?
That's correct. So when I calculate the statistics for this match, the marker where I have no determination would not be included in the statistical calculations. And then because there's only one allele present at these others, that marker has less strength. So if you looked at just the frequency of having 2 markers present, a complete profile, that's going to be more rare than if I looked at where anybody would have an 18 present. So it's used statistically, it just doesn't have as much strength as having local present.
Now, you can retake this. Despite the fact that you didn't have a 15 profile match, given the information that you did obtain from the foreign profile developed from the vaginal smears, were you able to conduct a population statistical analysis and determine how rare in the population that profile was in comparison to Mr. Smith?
Yes. A calculation, as I said, could be calculated from those markers that are present and those alleles that are present. At the time of reporting, I did not calculate a separate statistic. I just said it was consistent with the previous profiles in which I calculated a complete statistic. So I just reported that the foreign profile from the vaginal swab is consistent with the complete foreign profiles that I obtained from the neck swab and the anal swab.
At a later point in time during the course of discovery, in this case, did the state and the defense both ask you to go through that statistical analysis to see how rare in the population it would be and what the chance that that foreign profile in the vaginal area was different than that of the defendant, in this case, Donald Smith?
Yes.
And what was the statistical analysis based upon that?
That was 1 in 12 quadrillion.
And again, quadrillion, if you could just demonstrate for the number of zeros, how many zeros is that?
So we had 100 thousand, million, billion, trillion, quadrillion. I believe that's 18 zeros.
So again, with approximately 7 billion people on the face of the earth, it far exceeds the number of people who actually walk this earth at this point in time.
That's correct.
So the likelihood that it was somebody other than the defendant, Donald Smith, that deposited the foreign profile that's within her vagina is, again, what were the numbers?
1 in 12 quadrillion.
And again, you can't say it's an exact match based upon the limited amount of information that was obtained for those specific markers that you've discussed.
The results that I have are a match, yes.
So to summarize your work in this case, Ms. Lee, you were able to find the presence of semen on multiple swabs, correct?
Yes.
You then further analyzed those swabs that contained some of the semen and where the sperm heads were present to do the DNA analysis, correct?
Yes.
And you were able to find full profile matches on the DNA foreign samples in the victim's rectal area and the touch DNA that was around her neck, correct?
Yes.
And then finally, when it came to the vaginal area, the statistics that you just reported, there was a foreign profile that was consistent with the defendant to those numbers in the quadrillions.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. May I have a moment, Your Honor?
You may. All right, any cross-examination?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lee.
Good morning.
Are we still morning?
Yeah.
Yeah, good morning. You were able to get a DNA profile in regards to the touch DNA neck swab, correct?
Yes.
And so even though you've explained to us that exposure to the elements, in this case, submersion in water, you were still able to get a full DNA sample.
That's correct.
Okay. In regards to some of the other swabs that you were given, specifically the right breast swabs and left breast swabs, you did not find any DNA foreign to Cherish Periwinkle, did you?
That's correct. I took samples from each of those swabs through the DNA process, and I did not obtain any DNA profile. I did not have her profile or any foreign profile present.
Okay. And same question in regards to her fingernail clippings.
On her fingernail clippings, the samples that I took through the DNA process, I was able to develop a DNA profile that was consistent with Cherish Periwinkle. I did not have anything foreign on those.
Okay. Meaning you were able to get her full profile, and so DNA was there,
Correct.
but nothing foreign to Cherish Periwinkle underneath her nails.
That's correct. I did not develop a foreign profile.
I don't have anything further.
Any redirect?
Just does the amount of DNA that was originally deposited affect whether or not DNA will be found when you later look at the samples?
Yes.
So if more DNA is deposited in a specific location, such as the anus or the neck area, then the likelihood that, despite the elements are, that you may get profiles because there's more DNA there in the first place.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Okay, anything further?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay, may this witness be excused?
She may be, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. We appreciate your time this morning. Can I see the attorneys at sidebar regarding scheduling? I don't need the court reporter. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated.
Your Honor, the state will call Robert Hinson to the witness stand.
Okay, before he comes in, I just need to ask my question. Was everybody able to follow my instructions about not getting any information outside of the courtroom on this case? Was there anyone who did not follow that instruction? And the record will reflect that no one has raised their hand. Okay, you may proceed.
May it please the court. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury and spell your name for the court reporter?
My name's Robert Hinson. It's Hinson.
Sir, what's your occupation?
I'm a hospital pastor with one of our local churches.
Prior to taking that position, were you employed with the state attorney's office back in 2015?
Yes, I was.
How long had you worked with the state attorney's office?
From December of 2012 until the end of August of 2017.
Prior to working with the state attorney's office, did you have a career in law enforcement?
Yes, sir, I did.
Where did you work before the state attorney's office?
For 27 years with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, 26 to 27 years with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
And during your term with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, did you spend the time as a homicide investigator?
Yes, sir, I did.
And in fact, in the year of 2015, were you assigned to me as a homicide investigator for the state attorney's office?
Yes, sir, I was.
Sir, I'd like to direct your attention to April of 2015. Did there come a time when information was brought to the state attorney's office attention from the Duval County Jail?
Yes, sir.
Can you please explain how that information came forward?
We received information that the defendant, Mr. Smith, and another inmate were talking through between two cells, isolation cells, through some chase from an informant. At that point in time, we developed an idea of how we wanted to possibly memorialize or obtain that information when we were, if that conversation was taking place.
Now, the information that we received was from a confidential informant inside the jail, correct?
That's correct, yes, sir.
Okay. And at this point, when the informant told you about this, did he indicate that the defendant may be talking about the facts and circumstances of his case?
Yes, sir, there was the possibility that he was doing that, and also that there possibly was some conversation about disrupting court proceedings and things. We just weren't sure what kind of information we were going to get. So when we decided to come up with this idea of placing this device in there to try to get this information or obtain this conversation, that's how we came up with it.
Okay. And the information was obtained with you and myself present from that confidential informant, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
That took place in April. After April of 2015, what efforts did you make to investigate the possibility of recording conversation without the parties knowing about it?
I spoke with Jail Intelligence Officer Charles Carter. He's familiar with the isolation cells and how they're set up. I was not. How the layout was, how the cells were adjacent to each other. And so I approached him as far as talking about trying to get in and look at the cell or an area or how we could possibly obtain this recording. I also went, after having him photograph the cell and memorializing that, I went to a technical support detective and asked him what kind of devices we had with the sheriff's office at that time that we could use that kind of recording to place in there over a long period of time. Could we remotely listen to it from outside the jail? Did we have to have a long-term device that was in there? And according to Detective Gonzalez, who was helping me with this, they did not have the right equipment. So he had, after talking to him, he had to order some of that.
And when we're talking specifically about the information that we obtained about how the conversation was taking place, purportedly the inmates were communicating back and forth using the air vents that were connected by a pipe chase in between the cells.
That's correct. The cells were set up in such a way that there was almost like a V, and on either wall there was a square. I'm not sure the exact dynamic of it, but there was a wire mesh that was over, and in between one wire mesh on the isolation cell of Mr. Smith's cell and the isolation cell of the other inmate, there was an area, for lack of a better word, it was a chase area where there was pipes and other things like that we thought we could possibly put a device in there to obtain the conversation, if there was any conversation taking place.
Eventually, through the help of the technical support unit with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, was a recording device obtained that could operate for a period of time within that pipe chase.
Yes.
Directing your attention to June 23rd of 2015, through arrangements with the other detectives, was the recording equipment covertly placed inside that pipe chase within the Duval County Jail?
Yes.
After approximately 7 days, was that recording equipment then removed to monitor and see what was captured on the recording equipment?
Yes.
As a part of your duties with the State Attorney's Office, did you in fact listen to all the hours that were captured during the course of the recording that took place?
That's correct. I believe it was 74 and a half hours I listened to.
And out of that time frame, did you identify specific portions that were relevant to the case of the state of Florida versus Donald Smith?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
I'm now showing you what's been previously marked for identification purposes as 5K. Do you recognize that disc?
Yes, sir. That's the disc I signed.
Okay. And prior to coming to court, did you have the opportunity to listen to the contents of 5K and identify that that was in fact the result of the recording equipment that was obtained during the days between June 23rd, 2015 and June 30th of 2015?
Yes.
Okay. And these specific clips were exact recordings, just 4 set of clips from that time frame?
That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Detective. I don't have any further questions at this time.
Any cross-examination? May this witness be excused?
You may be, Your Honor.
Thank you. We appreciate your time today. You may call your next witness.
And Your Honor, at this point in time, we just need a moment. The next witness is an undercover officer, and we need to kill the video equipment.
Okay.
Portion of this testimony, we're then going to be playing a recording, and so we would pass out the earbuds at this point in time.
Okay, so y'all don't need them immediately, but you will need them during the next witness's testimony. So we're going to go ahead and give them to you now.
Your Honor, the state would next call Officer Charles Carter to the witness
Officer
stand.
Carter, thank you. Good afternoon, sir. Right in front of me, Madam Clerk will swear you in.
May it please the court. Sir, can you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury and spell your name for the court reporter?
Yes, sir. My name is Officer Carter, working for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in the Department of Corrections in the Intelligence Unit.
And Officer Carter, what's your first name?
Charles?
Okay, thank you. Can you please explain to me your duties in working at the Duval County Jail?
Yes, sir. I do anything from assisting other divisions inside the Sheriff's Office, anything from gang units to violent crimes, anything they need help with.
How long have you been employed with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
8 years and almost a month.
Okay. And during the time frame between June of 2013 until present time, have you been assigned to the Duval County Jail?
Yes, sir.
Specifically, let me direct your attention to the April to June time frame of 2015. Were you contacted by investigator Robert Hinson from the State Attorney's Office in regards to a possible investigation?
Yes, sir.
And how did you assist Investigator Hinson in following through with that investigation?
They were asking for some questions about taking pictures of our I-block cells where inmates are housed and potentially setting up recording devices inside there if need be for a potential case they were working on.
And did you assist in providing those photographs and working with the technical support unit?
Yes, sir.
I'd now like to show you what's been previously marked and moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 108. Could you please describe to the jury what is depicted in this photograph?
That is a picture inside of our housing units. It's a door that leads to the vent system where piping is for water and for air vents.
This hallway, where the person obviously is standing where the photograph is taken from, what is in that hallway area? What can be seen from that hallway?
That is inside of a dorm. It's a housing unit where inmates are housed.
Okay. And from the isolation cells, are there windows out that look out towards the dorm area itself?
Yes, sir. Inside those the I-block cells, those have a window on the front of them that faces out.
And does that also have access or a vantage point to the elevator area and the security vestibule area where at times jail tours and things of that nature are taking place?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so there is a line of sight from within inside the isolation cell to outside where the elevator area and vestibule area is located.
Yes, sir.
Now showing you what's been previously marked and moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 109, could you describe what's depicted in that photograph?
Yes, sir. That's the piping for the water and the electrical for the lights and things that are in there for the timers for the toilets and things of that nature.
Okay. And where do these air vents actually lead to? I know you've followed up and looked through with this. Where do, I guess, the air vents from the cells then lead to exhaust out of the building?
Yes, sir. They're for like airborne diseases. They lead straight to the roof.
Okay, so this ventilation system then goes straight up to the roof?
Yes, sir.
Now showing what's been previously marked and moved into evidence as State's Exhibit 110, describe what's depicted in this photograph.
The grates on the left and right would be the air vents that are leading to both the I-block cells that are housed beside each other.
Okay, so this where I put an R and then I put an L, those are the two grates that you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
And so this pipe chase is sort of triangular in nature in that there are isolation cells that, I guess, share that common area, only separated by the pipe chase.
Yes, sir.
So the ventilation in the left leads to one cell, the ventilation to the right leads to another cell.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Based upon information that was obtained, did you work with Detective Gonzalez from the Technical Support Unit to try to figure out a method to place a recording device within that pipe chase?
Yes, sir.
And did you actually assist him in entering into the dorm in a covert fashion and placing a recording device in the pipe chase in between the cells where the defendant, Donald Smith, was located and then another inmate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Brings me to a good point. You've been working at the jail throughout the entire time frame since June of 2013.
Yes, sir.
During your work with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, did you become acquainted and have you met the defendant in this case, Donald Smith?
I haven't sat down and spoke with him or anything, but I've heard him before. Yes, sir.
Okay. And you've heard him interact with other individuals?
Yes, sir.
And this is over the long period of time in between 2013 and today?
Yes, sir. Just because of where he's housed, it's a walk away for everyone when you come straight off the elevator.
Do you see the person who you know is Donald Smith located here in this courtroom today?
Yes, sir. He's right there.
Could you point him out and describe where he's seated and what he's wearing?
Yes, sir. He's to the left, wearing a tannish shirt with a blue and green tie.
Based upon working over the last 4.5 years in proximity to where Mr. Smith is housed and working in that housing unit, can you easily recognize his voice?
Yes, sir.
Now, on June 23rd, did you and Detective Gonzalez actually place recording equipment in the cells where Donald Smith and another inmate were going to be housed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then about 7 days later, did you go back and did you remove that recording equipment from those two cells?
Yes, sir.
And during that entire time frame, was Mr. Smith and the other inmate located within those cells once they were moved into those cells after the equipment was placed in there?
Yes, sir.
Now, Your Honor, may I approach, well, hold on 1 second beforehand. Moving on to State's Exhibit 111, does this basically show the interior of that isolation cell that we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Where in this photograph, and you can depict it by marking on the screen in front of you, where is that air vent that we were just talking about?
It'd be right here.
Okay. And then moving on to State's Exhibit 112, just a closer viewpoint of that air vent.
Yes, sir.
And again, State's 113, just another vantage point a little bit closer. That's directly above the mirror and the sink and the bathroom facilities of that cell block, correct?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Now showing you what's been previously marked for identification purposes as file K. Do you recognize that disc?
Yes, sir.
How do you recognize it?
I signed the top line.
Prior to coming to court today, did you have the opportunity to listen to the contents and the recordings that have been obtained on this disc and verify that they were accurately obtained?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And have you had the opportunity to identify those parties on that disc?
Yes, sir.
And were you able to identify the parties on that disc?
Yes, sir.
Is this an exact recording from the equipment that was placed inside the pipe chases in the days between June 23rd and June 25th of 2015?
Yes, sir.
Now, at this point in time, we move into evidence states to be the 5 cases next under exhibit. Subject for suggestion.
All right, subject to previous objection, it will be admitted as State's Exhibit 114. Do they need to put on
Your
their,
Honor, at this point in time, jury-
yeah, to put on your earphones now?
Make sure they're on.
What's that?
Let your neighbor look and make sure that they're on.
Turn them on and make sure the light is on in front. I think your light's not on here. Yes. With the court's permission, may I publish the exhibit to the jury?
You may.
Hold on 1 second, that's the wrong clip. Brian, it's Luke, it's not Jenny. Why don't we just try out again? Apologize, Your Honor, I had this example. Detective Carter, the voice that you just heard that said the one in the back, is that the inmate who was housed directly adjacent to the defendant, Donald Smith?
Yes, sir.
These are young girls, you hear me? They're young. Man, when you look at the girl's ass,
that's on that recording, is that the voice of Donald Smith?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the person who said they're about 12.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. You still think she's 12? Yeah. That's right in my alley right there. That's my target area right there. That's what I go after. Well, you have fun with that one.
Officer Carter, the person who said, that's my target area, that's what I go after, whose voice is that?
The defendants.
You still think she's 12? Yeah. That's right in my alley right there. That's my target area right there. That's what I go after. Well, you have fun with that one. See, her office would be the same here. Yeah. Letting that girl run out looking like that, man, with fake eyelashes, fake fucking nails, fake hair, fake titties probably. Yeah, I'd like to run into her at Walmart.
Officer Carter, the voice that just said, I'd like to run into her at Walmart, is that the voice of the defendant?
Yes, sir.
That hair was ridiculous. Straight fucking ridiculous. Cherry got some blood on her? Yeah? Damn, boy.
Let me just inquire, the voice that we just heard that said, Cherish have some blood on her, that was not this defendant, correct?
Yes, sir.
That was the other inmate in the adjacent cell.
Yes, sir.
She ain't like that, though. Because she ain't black. She had a lot for a white girl.
The last voice that was depicted there that said, because she ain't black, but she had a lot for a white girl, was that the voice of this defendant?
Yes, sir.
Officer Carter, this recording was made 2 years after the defendant was arrested, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I don't have any further questions.
Any cross-examination? All right, may this witness be excused?
You may.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. All right, thank you, Mr. Khalil. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, if you'd step into the jury room, I'm not sure how long this will take. We'll have you back out as quickly as we can. Thank you. That'll be at least 10. You have time to use the restroom. All right, I deny the motion for judgment of acquittal and find that the evidence thus far taken in the light most favorable to the state does present a prima facie case. Do you have any witnesses other than whether or not Mr. Smith might testify or not?
No, Your Honor, I have a complication with my client, so not be presenting.
Okay, let's take a break so you can speak with him about his options. And if you'll tell me how long you need, that's how long we'll take.
We have had an opportunity to discuss this prior to the beginning of the trial and throughout the trial. But
Maybe a 10-minute recess then? Okay, we'll be in recess for 10 minutes. You need to clear the courtroom so they can have their discussion. Okay. Mr. Smith, you're already under oath from earlier today, correct? Yes, ma'am. Okay. Your attorney has indicated, both of them, that you do not wish to call any witnesses to present a defense case. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
They've also indicated that you do not wish to testify. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you'll recall during jury selection, I read the jury portion of the instructions, which I also read to them before we started the trial, that you have the absolute right to remain silent. You're not required to present evidence or witnesses or testimony or do anything. It's up to the state. That's their burden of proof. Do you understand that? You do, however, if you wish, have the right to testify in your own defense, but you've indicated you do not wish to do that. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you also have the right, if you wish, to present witnesses, but you've also indicated you do not wish to do that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're 61 years of old?
I am.
Okay. I didn't say that very well. You're 61 years of age, correct?
Old.
Oh. And we've talked about your work in education history in the past, but I know you have a high school diploma. I can't remember. Do you have any college or skills training?
I do.
Okay. And you've worked at various jobs. Is that correct?